Hello and welcome. Jimmy Stewart was one of the world's most loved and admired movie stars who appeared in more than 80 films. As a young man, he studied architecture at Princeton, learned to fly a plane, went on to become a colonel in World War II, flying combat missions over Europe, and was later promoted to Brigadier General in the US Air Force Reserve. Prior to the war, he had appeared in some notable films, including Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and The Philadelphia Story with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. And while he began his movie career way back in 1934, it really took off after the war, notably with It's a Wonderful Life with Donna Reed. Over the next 3 decades, he worked consistently, often shooting 2 and sometimes 3 films a year. He starred in a number of westerns and worked on several occasions with acclaimed British director Alfred Hitchcock in Rope, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Vertigo, and Rear Window with Grace Kelly. In 1983, as part of a celebration of Hitchcock's work, Jimmy Stewart visited Australia. The following is a large part of a media conference he held in Sydney, answering a range of questions about his career, movies, personal life, working with Hitchcock, and other great directors like John Ford and Frank Capra. Despite some of the questions, Jimmy was always charming, open and witty.
Good morning, Mr. Stewart.
Sort of, if you will, speak up a little. I have a old man's hearing problem.
I was wondering, Mr. Stewart, if there was any film in particular that you enjoyed doing most of all that you've done.
Any role? Well, I think that probably would go into the picture that I enjoyed most, and I think probably the Capra picture, It's a Wonderful Life. It's hard to sort of separate them because sometimes you like the picture better than the work you did in it, and vice versa. But I don't know. Overall, I think the Capra picture.
Thank you.
Was that because it was the first picture you made after the war?
Yes. Actually, it was Capra's first picture also. And it was written, Mr. and Mrs. Goodrich, who had been writing, for years and years in the movies, were given, it was an idea. It was something sort of also that I was interested about because it didn't come from a book or an actual happening or a play or anything. It was just an idea that Capra got somebody wrote him a letter, or he saw it in a letter that somebody else got. Just the idea that nobody's born to be a failure, and that was one thing. And nobody's poor if he has friends. That sort of, and from that they took and made what I thought was quite an interesting picture.
Mr. Stewart, you must have one of the most successful marriages in Hollywood. Married to the same woman for so many years. Is there a rule you go by? Is there some clue to?
I don't know of any rules or anything. No, we're coming up on our 35th wedding anniversary in August. As far as the rules are concerned, I don't know, but it's been a wonderful thing. We've loved every minute of it. We don't fight very much, and when we do, she wins.
What do you think of the new crop of actors? People like Mel Gibson, the Australian, and other people like that. What's your opinion of the new type of actor?
Well, it was very nice. We had dinner with Mel Gibson and his nice wife last night, and I had a chance to meet him. I'd never met him. Read a lot about him, and I know I've seen Bounty. Very impressed with his work, and was very impressed to talk to him informally and everything, and get his this wonderful feeling he has about his craft, acting. And it's the wonderful thing to me that he, through his acting career, that he's kept the idea of the theater as a part of his acting career, and hasn't just saying, well, now I've done the theater and everything, now I'll start with movies and just do one right after the other. I personally think that the theater sort of is the basis of all sort of in our, when you think about different parts and different sections of our craft. I think the live theater is of tremendous importance, and anyone who can keep going like probably the best example of that is Henry Fonda and also Laurence Olivier. Henry Fonda I know a little more about because we've been friends for years. He just insisted on it. He would just he just demanded of himself that he take so much time and get back into the theater, and it was a wonderful sort of exhilarating build-up for him, and it's a new challenge every time you go back as you get more experience in the movies and naturally you're supposed to learn as you sort of develop your craft, but you can go to a certain extent in the movies, and then you need that little push that you get in front of a live audience. A little more, it's a little more question of discipline. It's a little more question of being conscious of the audience, which of course is very difficult and almost impossible in making films because you don't have any audience. But the theater is a tremendous thing to keep as a part of your craft, and it's wonderful to hear Mel talk about it, and I think he has a great, wonderful future.
Well, Mr. Stewart, all Henry Fonda and Sir Laurence have done extremely well in their latter years, in their dotage years almost, the years when you put up your feet. Have you got a great yen, perhaps, to rejuvenate your career and start now?
I didn't quite.
What I'm saying is Sir Laurence and Henry Fonda were very successful in their 60s and 70s. Have you got a yen to rekindle your career?
As far as the stage is concerned?
Stage or film?
Well, I'm ready to start rekindling any time. I think I very frankly have found that. And I don't register this as really a complaint or anything. I have found that there aren't too many grandfather parts now, and the ones that I find seem to be grouchy grandfathers. And I just have made up my mind that I refuse to play a grouchy old grandfather. I don't see why they have to be grouchy. I don't see why you have to be grouchy when you have some age on you. So I've made that a rule, and I suppose that in one way that sort of cut down the number of parts. But I'm going to do a sort of a revival of an old wonderful play, the late Christopher Bean. Do it with Carol Burnett here in a couple of months. So I managed to keep 2 or 3 a year going.
Speaking of marriages, would you please save mine? You had a wonderful line in some movie. He's the only man I ever met who started at the bottom and worked down. Do you recall that? Was it The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance?
I think it was, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Stewart, among many other things, you're a famous cowboy. But in recent times, there have been books that have suggested that the Wild West was a very different place to that portrayed. That cowboys were downtrodden and undernourished, exploited people. Has Hollywood been guilty of creating and perpetuating a big lie about the West?
You mean is the Western idea
really didn't exist as portrayed on the movies?
No, I don't know. I didn't hear that quite well.
Mr. Stewart, in Hollywood, has Hollywood misrepresented what the West really was? Did they tell it like it is?
Oh, I think close enough. I don't think we skip corners every once in a while, but I think the Western, the whole Western idea that was developed so much, it was very much a part of the early picture business. I think it showed the West pretty much as it is over the years. I think maybe in the last 10, 15 years, every once in a while, people try to do a Western where the people are psychological and have sort of terrible outlook on lives and suicidal and so on. But those have been disasters, which I'm very pleased. Over the years, I've noticed that the Western in Hollywood has gone in sort of waves as far as popularity is concerned. And nobody has an exact answer for that, but I've noticed that this happened. If you happen to get in on a Western when the wave is just on its way up, you're in fine shape. If you're in one that is just opening as the wave is on its way down to hit bottom, you're in trouble. But this isn't a new thing. I don't think this is the reason why the Western is not particularly popular these days, because this has happened many times. I think the Western still is sort of a basic of the picture business. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think in the Western, nobody says much. They're the motion picture in the actual true sense of the word. They're a visual medium. It's visual. They don't depend on the spoken word. I've heard John Ford so many times say, as I was working in a picture, he said he would cut right in the middle of the scene, and he said, "Cut. This is terrible. Everybody's talking too much." And I've seen him just tear pages out of script and say, "Now let's do it this way without the words." And 9 out of 10 times it's much better. It's this I think has been a wonderful thing for the Western picture, not only for us but for the picture being shown all over the world, because when you do a visual, you tell a visual story, and you don't depend on the spoken word, then you don't have any language problem. And I really think the basic story of our Western pictures is the basic story of those development days in our country, of the covered wagon days, the settling of the West and everything, which I think there's an interest in that all over the world.
Mr. Stewart.
Maybe I got off the track there, but
Mr. Stewart, I was wondering, did you do all your own stunts, and if so, did you enjoy doing them?
Do I what?
Did you do all your own stunts, and if so, did you enjoy doing them?
I did most of them, yes. I did most of them. It gives you sort of a satisfaction to do your own action and everything. I had a wonderful horse that I rode for 25 years, And in writing stuff that we had to do, he was a great help to me, because I actually think that we really carried on conversation between each other.
What was his name?
His name was Pye.
P-Y-E or P-I-E?
No, P-I-E, just like Apple.
Is there a role, Mr. Stewart? Is there a role or a type of role you haven't played that you'd like to play? A role or a type of role you've always wanted to play and haven't yet played?
No, I don't think so. I've been thinking about that recently. I really don't think so. I sort of thought and sat back, well, now, what could I have? I don't think so.
Mr. Stewart, what do you think was Hitchcock's essential ingredient that now, 20, 30 years afterwards, he's becoming popular again? What has Hitchcock got?
Well, this sort of resurgence of Hitchcock pictures has been an amazing thing for me, but as I've thought about it, I really think that the fact that some of the Hitchcock pictures have become successful and are being seen by actually a new audience is attributable to actually the genius of Alfred Hitchcock. I think he is capable, and always has been, of making pictures of the quality that are capable of lasting like this. Although I must say it was a complete surprise to me, and I must say a very pleasant surprise, because I saw Rear Window in New York. They opened it for the first time, and then when they re-released them. And my wife Gloria and I saw the picture. I hadn't seen the picture in 30 years, and I must say I enjoyed it very much. An actor, when he just finished the picture, sort of, and seeing it for the first time at the preview or at the thing, I've never really enjoyed one ever then, because frankly, you always look at yourself. And you always criticize. You always say, "Oh, why did they use that take? Why I did it much better in another take, and why did I do that?" Well, you end up sort of a very depressed person at the end of the thing. But I found in this, after 30 years, that I didn't pay much attention to it. There was this young man acting there who I hardly recognized, so I could enjoy the story and enjoy the genius of Hitchcock, the way he puts things together and gives it the frightening sort of aspect that only he is capable of.
Do you think that his movies were overcomplicated over the years? Critics have read things into them that perhaps Hitchcock never meant to be there.
I think so, but I don't see anything wrong with that. Hitchcock was so inventive that I believe, and so well prepared, and knew so much exactly what he wanted to get in a scene, or that he was so far ahead of everyone and had this in mind, what he wanted to get over on the screen, that a lot of it sort of spilled over. There was more there, and there was a lot there that could be taken in a different way by the audience, which I think is a very good thing.
You describe. What do you think of today's films, the Star Wars, fantasy films like that?
The Star Wars, I think, a wonderful, wonderful idea. I think today's movies, they get a lot of criticism wrong. I think the main thing lacking in today's movies is variety. I think I hate to say the good old days, and so I won't, but every once in a while it's a good thing to sort of look back and sort of see the difference and sort of see whether it was better that way than it is now. The only thing I can see as I do this every once in a while, look back, is the lack of variety today. I mean, the thing is based too much on shall we say, violence, on the violence, the type there is today. The stories seem to have, they seem to dwell on certain things too much of the time, and they don't go off and do completely different stories. I remember I started at MGM, and I remember the variety was everything. They had the Andy Hardy series. They started the Three Stooges. Ted Healy was sort of the Three Stooges used to be the straight man for Ted Healy, a wonderful comedian that died quite young, tragically. But I'm just showing the variety. They had the Andy Hardy series of the Three Stooges, Romeo and Juliet. They had the Eugene O'Neill plays. They had Ben-Hur, and then they would go back to little Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland pictures, and then enormous musicals starring every dancer in town and every singer in town, and this kept a variety, because I think film for theaters is capable of handling variety, and I think more variety would be accepted by more of the audiences of the world.
Have you seen many Australian films, Mr. Stewart? Many Australian films? Have you seen any? The new films here?
Well, I remember I saw the quite a while ago, the On the Beach and Sundowners, the Bob Mitchum and Deborah Kerr, and the one with Maureen O'Hara and Peter Lawford. Lately, I haven't seen too many of them. As I say, the Bounty's the only one of Gibson I've seen.
Getting back to Hitchcock again, Mr. Stewart, did you find that he was an actor's director?
I think Hitchcock had his own way of directing, which I must say is different than almost any one I've ever seen. But he was, as I say, he was so beautifully prepared. He would set the scene first photographically, and that I never saw him look through the camera. Never. But he would do this, and the cameraman would get back there and look through his hand like that, and he said, "This is what I want in the scene." And then he would go and sit down, and the cameraman and the lighter, the electricians, everybody would light the scene and get the props ready and everything. And then he would call the actors and say, "Well, now go around and try the scene and see how it feels to you." And we would. He'd have suggestions that maybe this one, but probably this is after a couple of us ran into each other when we were, but he would straighten that out. And this is the way. If after he'd gone over it a few times, but letting us sort of work out our own way as far as the scene was concerned, if he was satisfied with that, it didn't take him long to make up his mind, and he would say, "All right, let's do it."
So do you think she was justified in that criticism?
Well, no, I don't think. I even, I forget when it was. I think after a book that was written, The Dark Side of Genius, something like that, which was a rather disturbing book, I thought, about Hitchcock, and wasn't actually very good, I didn't think. But
sorry.
As a part of that book, Hitch is accused of saying that actors are cattle, and it always sort of tickled me, because I heard him say, somebody asked him about his true, and he said, "No, I never said that. What I actually said was actors should be treated as cattle." And he found that there was a tremendous difference in that. And when you think about it, there is a tremendous difference. If you're talking about the West and cowboys who sort of, with a herd, and they want to shun the herd off from a stream and get them to go up like this, they do this, and they treat the cattle in the way that they get them from not going across the stream, but get them up on the way to the ranch. And this is sort of the way Hitch says, now, don't go this way because you'll run into an actor coming here. Go this way. And he doesn't sit down and say, now, psychologically, your sort of feeling in this moment toward this young woman who your motivation in this is so-and-so and so-and-so. He doesn't do any of that, but he does lead us around. So I kind of decided on the treated as cattle. I think every once in a while I thought it'd be sort of nice several years ago to nominate Hitchcock for the Cowboy Hall of Fame.
Mr. Stewart, one of the very few musicals that you have made in your career, of course, was the Glenn Miller story with June Allison for Universal, I think it was. What was the feeling like to actually work in a musical and to emanate the lifestyle of a wonderful band leader in Glenn Miller? Did that give you great satisfaction, that role?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. It was a here again, it was a completely original concept of the man, and June Allison was just ideal as his wife. It's the type of music that I've always loved, and it's amazing that today that it's survived and survived. I don't to what extent here, but I know at home and in England particularly, the Glenn Miller music is still very much very popular. The picture itself, I was determined to give the effect that I was playing the trombone. And way before the picture started, I'd known a musician named Joe Uckel, who had been playing in orchestras as background music for the movies for a long, long time. And I got a hold of him, and he said, "All right, well now no problem. I'll teach you in the trombone because of the changes in the positions. It's very simple. Actually, no problem. And it'll be nice. I'll teach you to play the instrument, and it'll be nice, something nice for you to have, as a sort of something extra for you to do." Well, I started practicing a couple of months before the picture started because I wanted to get it now. And after about a week, he came to him and he said, "Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to quit." I said, "What's the matter, Joe?" Well, he said, the noises that you create when you blow through the trombone are so disturbing to me. I kicked my dog when I went home. I've never kicked him in my life and everything. And my wife and I have been fighting and everything. So I'll just have to go away from it. I can't. I said, would it help any if we plugged up the mouthpiece of the trombone so that it would be impossible to make any noise in front. He said, I never thought of that. Well, this is what we did. I learned the positions. I learned sort of he was at me, but he stood behind the camera, and I knew sort of all the. We didn't have notes of music. We had positions on the slide trombone, so it worked out very well. But I'm glad that he didn't. And he stopped kicking his dog. But
Did you ever play the role of a baddie, a real baddie?
No, and I was the murderer in one of the last Thin Man picture.
Why not?
But he didn't. He wasn't. I think he was. I forgot it was so long ago. But I think he was crazy in here.
Why not? Why not? Never again.
I don't know. No particular reason. I just. They never came along, and I actually never felt that I never felt like going out and looking for one, the part of a killer.
Mr. Stewart, you're a strong supporter of President Reagan, I believe. Do you get to the White House often?
Am I?
Do you see President Reagan often at the White House, or take any part in politics these days?
Oh, I'm going to help him in the sort of the election campaign and so on.
Don't you think it's irresponsible for a cowboy actor to pretend to have the qualities of the United States president? I mean, being a cowboy actor yourself, do you think that you qualify for that sort of job?
Well, I think Ronald Reagan is much more than a cowboy actor. I think I've known him for a long time, and he has had much more. He was much more than just as I say, a cowboy actor and an actor in 15, 20 years. He was interested in the Screen Actors Guild, in that activity, and actually got the guild started. And it was more or less his leadership that got the guild started. So I think the term, I suppose, will never leave him, the cowboy actor. But I don't think that has been actually a drawback. I think that he has grown up, and his sort of feeling and the training and leadership that he got, and interested in our way of life and in our government. Developed to a much stronger descent than the wanting to be a cowboy actor. I don't feel there's any danger to our country as far as that's concerned.
Another 5 minutes, please, and then that's
all right. To get back to movies, I have a photograph of you which I'd like you to sign.
No, I'd be glad to.
Would you sign my cast?
I'd be glad to. That.
Okay, we'll do that afterwards.
That looks like.
Mr. Stewart, we ask.
You described. No, this is a question. You described John Ford as a visual actor, and this somehow put me onto it. Would you compare Ford to Hitchcock?
Yes.
In that way.
Well,
because you mentioned
in one way, is they both had questionable regard for the spoken word. John Ford had the theory that if you weren't able to tell your story visually up there on the screen without relying on the spoken word, then you weren't using the medium correctly. And I think it was right. But in a probably more subtle way, Alfred Hitchcock had the same feeling. He was a visual man, and he got his type of direction and the type of story that he did. He was interested primarily in getting it on the screen visually. Thank you. I think in those they were very similar in those two, and And in another way, both of them tended to cut the picture in the camera. And by that I mean they didn't necessarily do it as long shot, as over the shoulder, with people close up for reaction. They had their own feeling about what the importance and what the sort of the movement and sequence of events should be in the scene itself, and they would photograph that. And when it was put together, this had what they wanted, but there wasn't very much left over. There were thousands and thousands of feet of close-ups that weren't used and of pan shots that weren't used. They both, and this was. It's not just with these two people. A lot of the visual men do it, and of course a lot in silent pictures. This was done much more than it is than it has been lately in talking pictures.
Mr. Stewart, I noticed that the seat next to you is vacant, and I was just wondering whether Harvey came up with you.
No, Harvey's at home because he has a cold. I spoke to him on the phone. My wife put him on, but they're arguing. He's blaming him for giving her the cold, so she couldn't come. He took great pains to stay away so he wouldn't give her the cold. I got started in the theater, and that's when we were talking about Mel Gibson. I feel that part of it was so important to me. I graduated from college in 1932 with a degree in architecture. I was going to be an architect. But a friend of mine in college, we'd been in college, asked me to come up to a summer stock company that he had formed up in Massachusetts, and just to spend the summer before I went to graduate school and got my master's degree in architecture. And I did this, and I went up, and there the acting bug bit me. I got the whole thing. Architecture went out the window, and when I went home to tell my family that I wasn't going to be an architect, that I was going to Broadway and play the part of a chauffeur in a play called Goodbye Again. Well, bless their hearts, they were very nice about it, but I noticed that everyone sort of reached for a chair.
About the way you talk, this might sound a bit rude to you, but about the way you talk, does that come natural to you, or did you cultivate it, this drawl that's become your trademark? Did you cultivate that, or is it the way you really talk?
I swear I don't think I've tried to use it as a trademark or anything. It's pretty much the way I talk. It comes so near to being a stutter, and I know this was I've had that since I was a kid. So, but I think it's pretty much the.
That's just you.
Pretty much me, yeah. Except when I'm imitating Rich Little, which I've done several times.
What a delightful gentleman. Sadly, Jimmy Stewart passed away in 1997 at the age of 89. Nominated 5 times, he won an Oscar for his performance in The Philadelphia Story, but was also awarded a special Oscar in 1985 for, as the award stated, his 50 years of memorable performances, his high ideals both on and off the screen, with the respect and affection of his colleagues. His very last contribution to the world of movie making was in 1991, providing the voice of Wiley in the animated film An American Tale, Fievel Goes West, which also featured John Cleese as the voice of a cunning pussycat called Cat R. Wall.